Thursday, April 13th, 2017. I'm your host, Sarah Mantle. We have a great show in store for you today. First up, we're going to check in with Town Manager Mark Ells. We'll find out what's happening on Beacon Hill with State Senator Julian Cyr. And finally, we'll talk with Precinct 3 Town Councilor Paul Hebert. All of that on this episode of Barnstable Today. But first, let's go ahead and get a look at today's top headlines. The Charter Review Committee will get to work this week. The committee will be discussing possible changes to the town's charter. Discussion items include the town collector position, preliminary elections, term limits, and filing of vacancies. The Charter Review Committee meets at 6 tonight in the Selectmen's Conference Room. Residents can now recycle food waste at the Barnstable Transfer Station. The new composting program aims to reduce the amount of food waste that is thrown away in the trash. Any resident with a trash or recycling sticker can take advantage of the program. Most kitchen scraps can be composted, including meat and bones, paper towels, and napkins. Items that are not accepted are kitty litter, styrofoam, and plastics. The composting program is partially funded with a state grant. Up next, we'll chat with Town Manager Mark Ells. So Mark, thank you for joining us today. I want to talk a little bit more about water, if we can. How are things going? I know there have been a lot of changing issues with EPA regulations. It's meant for tightening some of those regulations, some changes here in the Hyannis Water Division. Where are we in this process?
Evolving, I would have to say. We have obviously the immediate issues that may occur within a water system, perhaps. One of the good examples of an issue was what occurred to the Hyannis water system with the EPA dropping a advisory standard for a chemical called PFAS. Actually going into the summer season, and we had issues in both our Mary Dunn and our Mar wells within the system, which has prompted a whole bunch of change within the system operationally and the additional capital. But to back up a little bit, I think that for a long time we have been very focused in our water planning, because it's not just drinking water, it's all of our water. It's our bays and it's our ponds and certainly our beaches and our drinking water. And so as we back up, a lot of the focus has been on what you call a point source, which is kind of a known source. And it could be a site where a particular chemical may have been used or disposed of or stored, and somehow it got into the environment. That is what we're dealing with, for example, with the Fire Training Academy and the Mary Dunn wells, and trying to understand that and then trying to correct it. But in general, where we see, and it was a really good question about the EPA dropping the standards, in general, what we're seeing is it's not the point source, it's the non-point source. It's every single one of us and what we do in the environment, especially here on the Cape. The Cape's very unique in the sense that we sit on sand, so whatever you do on the land goes right into the ground and then goes into ponds, the groundwater, our bays, or our ocean. And for a long time, people would always say things like, well, the solution is that it dilutes down to a point where it's non-detectable. Well, that was true when it was parts per thousand, maybe even parts per million, not so much parts per billion, and now we're at parts per trillion, that when we detect this, we have concerns. So this prompts us to go out there and begin to talk to every resident of Cape Cod, every resident of Barnstable, and certainly every resident in the water district that we're responsible directly for in Hyannis, and start to say, okay, we need to start thinking about this. We need to make conscious decisions about it, because to blame the end of the pipe when we are the ones contributing to what's coming out of the end of the pipe really isn't the way to do it effectively. So we really need to think before it goes into the pipe, so to speak, what are we doing? Does it make sense? And educate and communicate, and then our citizens can make decisions about this.
And we've seen a lot of changes too. So for example, when you're talking about this, one thing that springs to mind is the town of Barnstable's decision to go green in not using certain fertilizers, not using certain sprays that may be harmful. This is something that we all can make decisions about in our own homes. And I think what's difficult for residents sometimes is maybe we don't know what things we should not be doing. Of course, looking back over history, we've all learned now that we shouldn't dispose of medication by flushing it down the toilet. That is not the thing to do.
Absolutely not.
You know, it's really tough. How do we learn more about some of these issues, and where can we go for guidance?
Another good question. I think leadership in communities, counties, state, federal need to make sure that they're making that readily available for all of our citizens. Real good questions. I mean, the town of Barnstable made a decision a decade ago not to, to go organic, but that's a little bit of a misnomer, but not to go organic with fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides, any of those things that we may use for treatment in areas, looking for us to move away from using, chemicals to hand maintaining, which does come, it's much more labor intensive, certainly. So you need to think about, are we going to get the resources we need to do it the way that we're being asked to do it? But that's okay, that's manageable, especially with a little bit of thought there. I think for the resident, they need to understand that many things that we buy, I mean, this emerging contaminant issue, many things that we buy regularly without thought because they're sold openly, not just fertilizer, that's kind of a specific thing, or you hire somebody and they put it down for you. But, things like with this emerging contaminant issue, flame retardant clothes, when you wash them, it rinses out, it goes down in your septic system, it ends up in the groundwater. Teflon pans, everybody likes those because things don't stick. But you know what? It contains these chemicals. And so we need to start to educate and think about this, because as these standards drop, and all of a sudden it's not some specific site that you can say, oh, that's what caused the problem. It's all of us and what we do every day. That's a big one. And then I've heard a lot of comment, and it's usually linked to wastewater treatment and the cost of wastewater treatment, and that it's polluting something. Emerging contaminants are one of those things that are being looked at now. But if we back up, where's the wastewater coming from? We don't have industry here. We have commercial, light commercial, most of it's service-oriented commercial, a restaurant, and then residents. It's us, and it's, you know what I mean? So it's not like there's an industry out there that's doing something that if we prevented it from happening, we would avoid this. And so that comes back to the educational component of this, and certainly engaging all our citizens, but our youth. They seem very receptive to considering modifying behavior, especially purchasing behavior, and thinking about products and saying, does it make sense? Do I have to do this? And what's the effect of it long term? So I think those sorts of opportunities, as somebody, in my post, if we can reach out, engage our youth, get them involved, have them understand, that's time well spent. And long term, it'll really help us to address this.
Now, do you see, I know at one point I attended a presentation by Liz Lewis, our shellfish technician at Barnstable High School. She was really interactive with the high school science class. In fact, they each got to try an oyster, many of whom had never tried an oyster before, if you can believe that.
Yeah, I can.
Barnstable High School students. So really informative experience for them. Do you see maybe the town of Barnstable taking an interactive approach with our youth and our high school students, or our students in general, to help educate them as well?
I think we should do it with all. I mean, if we can reach out to the whole spectrum of age, certainly, but we do have a captive audience with our youth through our partnering with our school system. We're actively having these discussions to take it the next step from what you're describing. Yes, that's going on, but it's somewhat limited. everybody should, whether they like to fish or shellfish, whether they are actively out in our ponds or at our beaches or understanding of our water system, I think they should have the opportunity to have it introduced to them. And then they can think about it and they can decide to what level they want to be involved. I had conversations as recently as this week with the superintendent about that opportunity to engage our students in this issue of emerging contaminants and understanding that the makeups we use and the pharmaceuticals that we purchase and the clothes that we buy and the cooking stuff that we use all contain these chemicals that get washed down and enter the environment. And some of it may not be an issue, but some of it may. And I certainly think that all of our citizens and our our youth need to understand it and then make decisions about it, and then know that once those decisions are made, they have ramifications. And the last place you want to be, it's very costly to react. To me, it's much more, it's far wiser to try to have a preventative and educational program in place that will help us to reduce reacting in the end. So that's all. And hopefully we can do this. And our residents are very informed, intelligent, engaged, I find. So I think they'll embrace this, and then they'll make decisions relevant to it. So when it comes to a tougher decision, let's say about money, or about changing how we use some important aspect of our community, they'll have the base information and they'll be able to say, okay, here's why we're having to make this decision. So
important, I think, education as far as learning some of these things. Thank you so much for joining us, telling us about how the town of Barnstable is reacting to these issues. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
My guest today, Town Manager Mark Ells. Now we'll find out what's happening on Beacon Hill with State Senator Julian Cyr. Joining me now on the phone, State Senator Julian Cyr. So glad we could catch up with you today. A lot's happening on Beacon Hill. I want to talk to you about your committee assignments. What committee assignments did you receive?
Sarah, it's so nice to join you. So last month's committee assignments were made by the Senate President. I am chairing the Joint Committee on Community Development and Small Business. So this is the committee where all issues of planning, small business issues, issues related to community preservation funds go. So it's a committee that's really important to us here on the Cape. It's the committee that zoning reform has been assigned to.
Yeah, interesting.
Some of our communities.
I was going to ask you about that because that was something you talked a lot about on the campaign trail, is really looking at those zoning laws, trying to make more affordable housing. And when I say affordable housing, I guess I just mean housing that working individuals can afford here on Cape Cod. So that would be the committee, I think, that would review those issues as well.
Yeah, we were very strategic about asking for that committee because so much of the solutions that we'll be able to find for the housing crisis we have on Cape Cod, and yes, it's affordable housing, it's also middle-income housing, it's going to lie with, in part, some support, some tweaking of state programs to make sure that they fit our needs. Of course, a lot of this is based at the local level, and so we're encouraging folks to get involved, at that level as well. A lot of exciting things happening around housing on Cape Cod. I'm optimistic. I also sit on the Housing Committee and also on the Municipalities Committee, which are the two other committees where affordable housing issues tend to crop up. And then I serve as Vice Chair of the Elder Affairs Committee and Vice Chair of the Arts, Tourism, and Culture Committee.
Another important one here on Cape Cod. Clearly important
ones for the region. So actually later this week I'll be joining Governor Baker and Secretary Sutters and others on a big announcement on some elder services for older folks. And then, arts and tourism and culture is just, part of our bread and butter here in the region. And I think I really am continuing to push on Beacon Hill for adequate resources for us to promote our community.
Yeah, important topic. Recently chatted with Wendy Northcross, the CEO of the Cape Cod Chamber of Commerce. She, of course, is really pushing for some tourism funding. How is that shaping up during this budget season?
So the House has just taken up their budget this week. The Senate's going to go next in May. But really, the state has done we've really not done a good job allocating resources to promote tourism. The tourism sector, if you talk to Wendy's about, we estimate it's one of the third largest sector in the Commonwealth. Last year's budget, we only allocated, I think, about $10 million for tourism promotion, and that was cut in half by Governor Baker in mid-year spending cuts. That is peanuts in a $40 billion budget. So I'm really trying to make the argument that these investments have a really great return, not only for our community, but in the millions of dollars in room occupancy and meal tax that go to the Commonwealth from visitors to Cape Cod, Martha's Vineyard, and Nantucket.
Well, glad to hear you have some great great committee assignments that you'll be working on, many issues related to the Cape and Islands, of course. I want to talk to you, too, about a local event you recently attended. You attended the CCYP Shape Your Cape Summit. What can you tell me about that event?
That was fantastic. So there was easily, just me doing my own counting. I mean, there's hundreds of young folks, and by young I mean, anyone under 55 on the Cape, really having conversations about how do we support young professionals, how do we support economic development in the business community. I participated in two panels, one talking about housing issues led by the Cape and Islands Realtors Association, and the other panel essentially telling people how to kind of get involved in politics and local politics. I think there's a real desire, because especially in this moment, a lot of people are coming to me and others asking how do they get involved. But really the highlight of the summit was the keynote speaker, a local young woman who has been in recovery for 9 years, talking about her experience. That was pretty tremendous. But I left feeling very buoyed, I think, for anyone who is feeling a little pessimistic about the future of this region. Attend a CCYP event, and you will not feel that way.
Yeah, such a great organization. I want to also talk to you. I know the Cape and Islands and Red Cross recently held their annual Red Cross Heroes Breakfast. What an amazing event. You got to attend and see a lot of people being recognized for some great work they're doing for the community.
So many people being recognized, and so many people who are, kind of unsung heroes who you wouldn't otherwise necessarily know about it. And you just sit, as you're sitting watching the program and you're reading the list of people getting honored, person after person is just truly tremendous. So our office, with the whole Cape delegation, worked behind the scenes to make sure we gave them some special recognition from the state. But truly a really remarkable event that the Red Cross puts on, a real highlight of just seeing what our community is about. And so that was really enjoyable to go to that. And then afterwards, we headed to Nantucket and had a full day there. So we're definitely keeping busy, but I highly recommend folks participate and attend next year's Red Cross Heroes event. It is worth your time.
Yeah, it is one of my favorite events of the year for sure. One of my favorites to cover. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it and look forward to chatting with you again in a couple weeks.
Enjoy the good weather.
Oh, yes, you too. Talk to you soon.
Take care.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye, Sarah.
My guest today, State Senator Julian Cyr. Precinct 3 Town Councilor Paul Hebert recently stopped by the studio to talk about issues he's working on. We share that interview with you now. So, Paul, glad that you could join us today. You are the town councilor, of course, for Precinct 3. Talk to me about some of the things that are happening in Precinct 3. I know one effort recently on Lincoln Road was to get traffic to try and slow down there.
Yes. And they've been working on that for like 3-4 years. And ever since I've been on the council, it's been a concern. And I know things take time, and sometimes I lose a little bit of patience, and my wife has to keep reminding me. The Daily Word today said it's all about patience. And so, it's like a straightaway, huh? So it's just an area where people don't mean any harm, but it's just like I can get from here to there. I can get from West Main Street to Route 28, and it's a clear path. Huh? But kids can come running after a ball, all different kind of things. And of course, we're all got our minds on a lot of things, and we should be just focused on the driving. So there's some things that I've asked be corrected as soon as possible. As simple as when you come from West Main Street and you're turning, and of course you're being cautious because you've got traffic coming at you from West Main Street if you're turning left. You've got traffic coming off of Lincoln Road, turning right or left. You've got school kids crossing there. Sometimes there's a crossing guard, but other times there's nobody there. Just as you turn, there's where you see the first sign that says speed limit is 30 miles an hour. It's a yellow sign. It's not a white sign. It's a yellow sign. But by time you turn, that sign is right there. So you've already passed it by time you relocate yourself to looking down the road. The next sign says end of school zone. So if you did catch that it was a 30 mile an hour posted, you think that was the school zone. School zone is more like 20 miles an hour. So the brain then says clicked off, okay, it didn't say you can speed now, but 40 miles an hour won't kill anybody, or 45. So it's been a big issue. So we're working on that. I've talked to Mr. Santos and tried to say, come on, let's get some more signs there. I've talked to the police chief. He's going to order some of those more signs so we can put the blinking, this is your speed. We have to put the speed limit is 30 miles an hour, and this is your speed.
And those can be really effective for individuals who are driving down the road. I think too, as a driver coming off of maybe Route 28, you're heading at a pretty quick rate of speed.
50 miles an hour,
you're
45,
in that zone. You're turning onto Lincoln Road. It is a neighborhood, and you may not realize that you do need to take that extra step and slow down. But those signs that flash show what your speed are can be very effective at really making drivers aware of how fast they're going in a neighborhood.
Yes.
And that they maybe should need to slow down.
Yeah. So again, nobody means any harm, but I know that the chief has put some more cars there and catching the speeders, and so I appreciate that. So I hope that it's been an issue ever since I've been a councilor, and it's time to do something to improve the situation. So, but at the same time, in Hyannis, which I'm a Hyannis councilor really, we're looking at Cappy's is coming in off of 28. And my concern there is they enter from 28, but they exit onto Spring Street, which is the door to a neighborhood that's there. And so I'm very, very concerned about that. So I'm hoping to see more signage go up there. You're entering a neighborhood, and there are children there, and nobody's used to that level of traffic. So I'm very, very concerned about that. So, and all over town, as I look at it more and more, I mean, all of our side streets are saying 30 miles an hour, and some are even 25 miles an hour. And so we have to readjust ourselves to how important it is to follow those speed limits, and because anytime somebody gets hurt in an accident, it's tragic. So we don't need to go there.
That's right. I want to talk to you about another interesting topic. I know a lot of people, maybe, especially in my neighborhood, I frequently pick up a lot of nips on the ground. So people may be having a nip of alcohol in their car, tossing it out the window. This is dangerous on multiple levels. It's also a nuisance trash-wise. It's littering in the street. So you have actually started to try and fix this problem.
Yep. We have a petition. I run a redemption recycling center, and so we have a petition out there, and the public is responding very, very well to this. Representative Randy Hunt has put out a bill to put a 5-cent return on the nips, and so in support of that effort, to get the litter off the streets. My wife says, let's go for a walk. And I say, what we end up doing is cleaning up the neighborhood. We bring bags with us, and we're picking up nips are everywhere. If we could pick up mushrooms like we pick up nips, we would never have to buy a mushroom in our life. So it's just out of control. But what's beyond that? What's the next story? Well, the next story is that somebody put that nip there. And 9 out of 10, it's somebody who's been driving, and they don't want to get stopped and have nips in their car, so they throw them out the window. And then also pedestrians apparently walk around with them. We have heard, since I've gotten more involved in this, that moms are telling me that the kids, they find nips in the kids' knapsacks. Employers have told me, no, it's not uncommon. The nips are in the lunch boxes of my employees, and then they're handling heavy equipment. So it's a danger, danger, danger. A statistic that came out just last week is that some over 11% of people that pedestrian accidents with cars are up 11%. And at the same time, what they found out that a good 30% of the people who either were the pedestrian or the driver had alcohol in their systems. So it's a very, very, very serious problem. So everybody that I've asked to sign this petition, my petition asks for a friendly amendment that says that some of the money that would end up back in the state coffers would be used for educating the public, especially our school kids, of the dangers of drinking, especially at young age, and then also mixing it with the liberalization of the marijuana. So if somebody's using marijuana and drinking, it becomes a very dangerous situation. Everybody, they're signing this petition, and I got school kids doing the petition among themselves also, to empower them and to help them to understand the seriousness of the problem. Everybody says you should have done this 10 years ago. Why did it take you so long? But people say, hey, every morning I go out and I pick up 3, 4, 5 nips on my front lawn. That's I'm not talking just about me, I'm talking about people who sign it. They say they're all over the place. We got to do something about it, and it's a serious problem.
Yeah, I've seen a lot around town myself. Well, thank you for checking in with us. I really appreciate you stopping by, telling us about everything that's happening in Precinct 3 and all the hard work you're doing on the council. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for getting the message out to the public. We really appreciate that, and this is a great opportunity to do just that. So thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. My guest today, Town Councilor Paul Hebert. He, of course, is the Town Councilor for Precinct 3. Now let's find out what's happening around town in today's community calendar. The Cotuit Library will host its annual Easter egg hunt this Saturday, April 15th. The event kicks off at 10 a.m. Kids will have a chance to meet the Easter Bunny and to find some eggs. All they need to bring is an Easter basket. The event will take place, rain or shine. The Hyannis Public Library's award-winning bookshop will be open every Saturday, beginning this Saturday, April 15th. The bookshop will be open each week from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. on Saturday. The only meeting we have today here in Town Hall, the Charter Review Committee will meet at 6 o'clock tonight in the Selectmen's Conference Room. Thanks so much for joining us today. We're going to be back tomorrow with another great show for you. For Barnstable Today, I'm Sarah Mannel.